Hey guys! Today's video is going to be a run through of a new doll that I have up for grabs, Irrengal the Spirit Dragon. I'll take you through a little bit of the process, so stay tuned. So I start off by casting a head and feet in resin that I've sculpted and moulded myself. And for this dragon I didn't actually sculpt any horns originally because I wanted to be able to, because I wanted to be able to change up the horns with every dragon, so I preferred to sculpt the horns with each piece. So for the horns I usually use an air dry clay. It's relatively cheap and you can find it on Etsy. It doesn't have a name or anything, it's just air dry clay. And it's got a great texture and it has a little bit of give, so it's not fragile at all, and it's really good if you're sending things overseas. So I'd probably say the only downside about this clay is it doesn't hold much detail, but for the horns it's okay, but I wouldn't really recommend sculpting anything out of it. But you know, it's great for little textures like this. Alright, so just a quick little jump to both horns that are sculpted. I really like the way they turned out. It gives it a sort of a sleek look, which I like. So I'm going to be painting the eyes of this dragon a silver, and I'm using this Lumiere paint by Jacquard in metallic silver, and you can probably find it at specialty craft stores. It's really great paint and I highly recommend it. So just going in very carefully, painting in the eyes first. This silver is a little bit transparent, so it does need 2 or 3 layers. I only put 2 layers down because I cover most of it with a black pupil anyway. I normally speed up my videos just because it's very time consuming and kind of boring if it's in normal speed, but I'm just going to show you how long it actually takes in the normal speed here. I know it gets kind of lost when the video is sped up all the time, and I just wanted to show you just how long it does take. So I wanted this dragon to be mainly white, but I wanted to have a sort of pearlescent look to it, so I used another paint to paint the body in like a purpley blue pearl. So just a note, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram, so check it out at Creatures of Nat. Alright, so now back to painting the pupil, and I'm using that black chromacryl paint that you've seen me use multiple times, and I'm using sort of a dry brush technique to just apply some thin layers of black to the pupil, and when you build it up it sort of gives it a nice effect which blends into the iris area. And because you're using a dry brush technique, it doesn't take very long for the paint to dry, so you can go back and forth between both eyes and get the job done. So I put, a couple of layers of black paint on until you're happy. There's no right or wrong answer. So I'm just going to fill in the nostril areas and the mouth with some black paint. You got to be careful when you're doing a white doll that you don't get too much black anywhere, because it's really hard to get rid of once it's painted onto the piece. So just thought to take just some extra care when using black and white. Right, so I've decided to use some chrome acryl paint in gold oxide to paint in between the scales, so it brings out the scales a little bit more and it's just not a solid white piece. So I tried this gold oxide and I didn't really like it. I mixed it with a bit of white because I wanted a light coat, but I decided to go with burnt umber, and I'm using a different paint from Golden, and they're a little bit more expensive, but they're not really for painting resin pieces. They're good paints if you're painting a painting, but they're very, very thick, and you tend to water them down a lot to use them. So I decided to go with this paint to paint in between the scales. I thought it gave it a better look than what that light colour did, and using a watered down version so it runs in between the scales and I can wipe the excess off the top of the scales. This was an incredibly time consuming part. It took me hours to do it, and I didn't want to just wash over the whole piece with this brown because I didn't want to ruin that white paint, and you know, I'm a bit finicky. You could have done a wash over it, but I didn't want to do it that way. Just a really quick little shot of painting the feet, and I'm using that same silver paint from the start just to paint the nail area and the paw pads, and the rest is going to be painted in that white with the brown highlights around the scales. So I'm using a Mongolian faux fur for the body of this dragon, and I really like using this fur for dragons because it kind of represents horns, if that makes sense, and rather than using a scaled fabric, I just thought it gives it a different feel and different look, which I quite like. So again, I'm just cutting the backing of the fabric and not the actual pile because it will ruin the way the body looks, and I can do it quickly and you'll get better with practice, but yeah, definitely just inserting the scissors in between the backing and the pile of the fur, you can get a great cut. So I choose to sew most of my bodies with a sewing machine, and this is really the only technique you can use. I find it a bit more sturdy than actually hand sewing the whole thing or even gluing it, but I will do some hand sewing later on when I close it up. Right, so I'll just give you a quick little look at the wings that I'm using. I tried a different fabric, which was a thin fake leather, but it didn't really hold together too well, and I wasn't really happy with the way it turned out, so I moved on to this fabric, which is a faux suede, and I created the armature inside, and I used a transferable webbing to attach the pieces together, and I'm now just gluing up the loose ends that didn't take to finish it off and make it posable. Alright, moving on to sewing the body up, and so I'm using a ladder stitch to close up all the loose ends, and it's a bit time consuming and my least favourite part of making the doll, but very necessary to close up the pieces. So once I've sewn all the legs together, I use a tacky fabric glue to attach the fur to the resin pieces, and it holds really well. You don't need any sort of super glue or anything, just a fabric glue will do the job. And here she is! She is available for adoption in my Etsy shop. You can find the link in my description if she's not already snatched up. Alright guys, that's it for me today. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. If you got any requests, leave it in the comments down below. Don't forget to check me out on Instagram and Facebook, and I'll see you in the next one. Ciao!